And I would like to invite to the stage Marta Bellés-Muñoz from Dusk Network. Hi, Marta.
No?
Yeah, we can see you. Yeah, we can see you now. Amazing.
So let me share my screen.
Thank you so much, Marta, for joining. Marta is a cryptographer and a researcher at the Dusk Network with a degree in mathematics. And yeah, we're very excited for your presentation today.
I'm very excited to be here as well. First of all, thank you for inviting Dusk and myself to talk. Oh, sorry, I should start with the first slide, which is the title of the talk. Today, I'm going to talk about the road that we follow to a privacy-proof layer 1 protocol. Scott said I am Marta. I'm a researcher at Dusk Network, and I'm also doing a PhD in cryptography at the Pompeu Fabra University. I have a theoretical background in mathematics, and I joined the crypto space about 3 years ago. During my master's degree, I got interested in cryptography and especially how it was used in blockchain to guarantee privacy. And this is also the reason of the topic of the talk. I started with a project that used Ethereum to build an identity-based solution. And at the beginning of the year, I joined Dusk Network, which is a blockchain that adds privacy to each of its layers. So to give you a little bit of context, Dusk is intended for financial applications. It's technology for securities. It's an open source blockchain infrastructure that businesses can use to tokenize financial instruments and automate costly processes. You can see in the image how it shows our technology stack. The network is built from ground up with focus on the financial market, which means that it has a specific needs that need to be taken into account. And for this reason, we tailor most of our solutions for businesses, and it's designed to comply with strict regulatory requirements and financial market principles. So for example, privacy and compliance are very important in this case. I will focus today on the bottom 2 layers, the crypto primitives and ZK suite, which I think it's the beginning of almost any layer 1 blockchain. Let's start from the beginning, when Bitcoin network was presented in this article from Satoshi Nakamoto in 2008. Someone proposed this peer-to-peer network as an electronic cash system. And the ideas, as you know, gathered in this article shocked the economic world as we understood it until then. And the cryptography, there was already the proposal of using cryptography for building this new system, but it was not originally intended to be used for privacy purposes. Instead, it was used for the safety and security of the network. So Nakamoto proposed to use elliptic curve cryptography mainly to secure transactions on the network, for the generation of new currency units, and for transferring digital assets and tokens. In fact, Bitcoin is completely open and public, so everyone has access to the information in there. Since I work in cryptography, I think it would be good just to have just one slide of what do you do when you are in the Bitcoin network? How do you use elliptic curve cryptography? So an elliptic curve is basically a set of solutions of a certain equation. So we can think of these solutions as, in this case, the equation has x and y. So we can think of the pairs x and y that satisfy this equation as a point in a two-dimensional map, together with an extra point called point at infinity. And we also have a weird operation that allows us to add points. So to add, two solutions that are solution to this equation. So once we have the set of points that satisfy this equation, we can create what we call a group. And with all these points, we create our public and private keys. So we can have public key cryptography within the elliptic curve framework. In this case, we need something called a generator, which is on a special point. So when we are in Bitcoin, our private key is a number and our public key is the result of multiplying one number by a point. So our public key is actually a point on an elliptic curve. And the security assumption of this scheme is what is called the discrete logarithm, which means it's difficult to recover the private key given a public key. So this is the idea of elliptic curve cryptography, and this is what it's used in Bitcoin, and also this keys is what you use to sign transactions and to work with all this machinery. But in any case, it was not really intended for privacy, but for security, safety, and consistency of the network, as I said. So when Ethereum came in, again, there was an evolution in the blockchains. They presented this capability of having smart contracts, which is a self-executing contract with the terms of the agreement between buyer and seller being directly written into lines of code. So this capability of writing a smart contracts turned blockchains into what we call distributed computed platforms. Ethereum was an evolution to the original Bitcoin network. And at Dusk Network, we were really interested in using smart contract blockchains since it's a network that is intended to work in the market space. We need businesses to be able to run their own rules within the network. So in this case, Ethereum is also open, but the code of the smart contracts are open to everyone who has access to the network. So in our case, we need something called confidential smart contracts that would allow companies to use our public blockchain while maintaining complete data privacy. So let's look at how other blockchains handle privacy. In the case of Monero and Zcash, which were the first two blockchains that added this layer of privacy, they could obscure the value and the recipient of transactions by using what we called zero knowledge proofs. So what's a zero knowledge proof? So how do we do it? How can they ensure that a transaction is correct if I don't see the details? So their idea was, let's keep the same idea of blockchain, but now every time that someone does a transactions, the other people will not be able to see the amount of money that it's being transferred, know who is sending it and to whom, or anything like that. So how can we make sure that the transaction is still valid, that there is no double spending, that there is no weird stuff going on if we cannot see the details? So with zero knowledge proof, this is actually possible. Just for those of you who are not familiar with this technology, just look at the second part of the word. It's just proofs. So what's a proof? Proof is something that convinces us that something is true. So for example, if I tell you there are infinitely many prime numbers, so this is just a mathematical statement, but that's what I tell you. And if you tell any mathematician this statement, the first thing that they will ask you for is a proof. So you have to prove to me that this statement is true. So for example, this is just a proof of this statement, okay? The nice thing about this proof is that although we are able to prove the statement, we don't really reveal anything about prime numbers. We just prove that the statement is correct. We don't really know if a certain prime number is a prime or not. Given a prime number, if we can find the next one or anything, we just prove that the statement is true, and we don't really learn anything from the proof. This is the same idea of zero knowledge proofs. You can prove statements without leaking any information beyond the veracity of the statement that it's being proved. So with that, we can actually write statements and prove them without revealing this information. So in the case of Monero and Zcash, what they do is, let's think of transactions, validity of transactions as a statement, and let's prove that those transactions were done correctly without revealing some of the details. So in general, the way we use zero knowledge proofs is that we write a certain arithmetic circuit, which is basically a circuit that contains additions and multiplications. We have some inputs, we perform these operations, and at the end, we get an output. So in the context of blockchains, what I was saying is precisely writing all the checks that transactions need to satisfy as a circuit. Then the inputs are all the transaction details. The circuit will check that everything has been done the way it is supposed to be done. And then we output 0 or 1 depending on whether the checks were okay or not. So with zero knowledge proof, what we actually do is that we do the exact same logic, but we keep all the inputs private. So we can run a proof that all the checks are correct, but now the transaction details are hidden, but we are still able to check if this transaction pass all the checks they are supposed to pass. Yeah. So how did Monero and Zcash did it? They use zero knowledge proofs. The approach of Monero is to use a particular type of zero knowledge proofs called bullet proofs, whereas Zcash used SNARKs. In the case of bullet proofs, you can see that the verification time, it says ON. This means that if the circuit is large, then the verification time will also be large. If the circuit grows, the verification time will grow accordingly. Whereas with SNARKs, the verification time is constant. This means that regardless of the size of the statement, regardless the size of the circuit, regardless the size of the circuit that is checking the statements, the verification time will always be the same. If that means being fast or slow, that depends on the machine you run it in, but it's independent from the statement, the size of the statement being a proof. So in principle, SNARKs should be way better than bulletproofs, but they have a caveat, which is called the trusted setup. So the original SNARK protocols required this thing that we call trusted setup, which is a phase in which we need to generate a set of initial parameters that at a later state must be destroyed. So it's called trusted because you have to trust that it has been computed correctly. And to distribute this trust, we typically use something called MPC, multi-party computation, which means that many parties are involved in this phase and they all contribute to generate these parameters. Usually the way they use it is that it's enough that one of the participants is honest to make sure that the whole setup has been constructed correctly. So in the case of Zcash, I know that they did quite a wild ceremony to ensure that the trusted setup was done correctly. You can Google it if you want. But yeah, it did involve breaking some computers. So you can see that the trusted setup phase is quite a practical problem that we have to face. So in our case, we thought about, for our context, about using Ethereum blockchain and benefit from their security assumptions, but we could not use Monero and Zcash because they don't support smart contracts. So we decided to use at first Ethereum, but it was not enough because it does not guarantee privacy as a layer in layer one. So you need to use layer one solutions in order to achieve privacy. So in our case, Zcash, original Zcash SNARKs protocols are not very suitable. Bulletproof had this problem of the verification time, and Ethereum was not suitable for our context. So what we did is that we waited enough until Plonk was released, which is a paper from Gavison, Williamson, and Sibutari, which is Zcash SNARK as well. But in this case, it uses what is called an updatable universal structure reference string. This means that we can remove one of the main obstacles in deploying Zcash SNARKs. What is this? We still have to run a trusted setup ceremony, but in the original scenarios, every time you had a different circuit, you had to run this ceremony every time. Whereas now with this new proving system, the trusted setup can be reused for different circuits up to a certain size. So in our case, where we want to have confidential smart contracts, every smart contract will be written with respect to a different logic, which means that every smart contract will need their own specific circuit. Therefore, we should have a trusted setup that is valid for all those smart contracts, because the alternative is to have one trusted setup per per smart contract. So we run some numbers, what was more optimal for us, if either using bulletproofs or Plonk. You can see in the benchmarks that we decided that Plonk was more suitable. And we created an open source REST library that you can, all of us have access to it. And right now, Dusk has been running on Plonk, using Plonk in all of their layers. And right now we are working on a protocol that will integrate lookup tables into Plonk. The idea of lookup tables is that in a circuit, originally you can only have addition and multiplication gates. And we add a new type of gates called lookup tables, which means that you have certain inputs and an output, and that output is calculated, instead of being calculated from a certain operation, it's just all the results are just gathered in a table. So you basically, instead of computing the output, you look at the table and you put the output as it's supposed to be. So you prove that the result of the inputs and the output corresponds to a row in a certain table. We have run the first benchmarks of integrating lookup tables into Plonk, and it seems that it's it will be quite a reasonable protocol to have. We have also looked into efficient functions, hash functions that can run in circuits to make overall zero-knowledge proof systems more efficient, which will allow us to have these confidential smart contracts in a way that people using our network can issue and trade shares and perform actions or working with the dividends or even both in an efficient manner. The idea of having lookup tables is also a key point for having recursive SNARKs. In case you don't have the idea, right now people are working on what is called one-level recursion, which means that you use a proof to verify that another proof is correct. So this way, you kind of verify two proofs just by verifying one. Whereas with unbounded recursion, we do this recursively. So we can verify a proof that is verifying another proof, which is verifying another proof, which is verifying another proof, and so on. In that at the end, if we verify that the first proof is correct, it will mean that all the set of proofs were also correct. So as the slides say, in other words, with one single proof, we could verify that n proofs are correct. So this would actually open the door to what we called succinct blockchains. So if we think of each block of a blockchain as a certain set of transactions that need to operate on a certain logic, we can create proofs that prove that all that logic was satisfied. So if we have one proof per every single block of the blockchain, and we are able to aggregate them or do a recursive logic on all of them with one single proof, we would be able to prove that the whole blockchain, so that the last state came from valid states. This will not only so zero knowledge is not only helping in the privacy side, but it's also helping scalability. So it's helping to build these succinct blockchains, also for batching range proofs and doing oblivious transfers. And at the end, the idea of recursion is facing some theoretical problems, but the idea is to build a system at the end that it's efficient for everyone using it. Some of the use cases of Dusk include confidential smart contracts, confidential security tokens, decentralized finance. These are some of the use cases that you could think about when you can think of the things that can be built on top of Dusk. And just to recap, to give you a few things to bring back home, we have gone through the road to privacy proof layer 1 protocol. We started with Bitcoin, which had no privacy on it. Then we looked at Ethereum, which added the capability of having smart contracts. Then we look at the different privacy solutions where we had Monero and Zcash as the main two blockchains that have this extra layer of privacy, which was achieved with zero knowledge. Ethereum, to achieve privacy in Ethereum, we need layer 2 solutions. So we decided to use, to mix the two things and have the best of the two worlds, where we have smart contracts, but also privacy in all the layers, including the smart contracts. So now at Dusk Network, we can also have confidential smart contracts, which fits very well in the context we are in. So keep in mind that zero knowledge is a very powerful tool for both privacy and scalability guarantees, that we have an open source zero knowledge libraries that are ready to use, and you are also welcome to contribute to them. In general, I think blockchains, we should work towards auditable and transparent technology, so privacy can go in hand with transparency, and that overall with efficient technology, we can help at the end make blockchain adoption wide. So this is it. Thank you very much for listening. You have my email here. I hope you learned a little bit more about the technology that can help build privacy protocols. You also have the website and the Telegram group, which I must say is very open and active community. So if you have any questions, you can ask them now. You're also welcome to send me an email, use the Telegram chat. Well, that's it from my side.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Marta, for such an amazing presentation. And let's open up the stage for questions, if there are any. Just give it a few minutes. Thank you.
Okay. Well, otherwise, if you have questions later on, you're welcome to use, you can send me an email, but probably the Telegram group is the best option.
Amazing. And I'd like to hear more, like, how did you get involved with Dusk Network, and what was the most happiest moment with the project?
Well, in the other project I was in, I started working into zero knowledge proofs, and I was very amazed of the potential of these tools. So I got a little bit obsessed with privacy and having privacy in all the layers. And a friend of mine was working at Dusk, so he told me about the project, and he asked me if I would like to join the research and development team, and I said yes. I also like the fact that Dusk is really promoting research in this line, so they are really giving us the tools to make things very efficient and to bring it to the whole community. And I think they are very patient, because sometimes research does not go in line with practical deadlines. So the fact that they really support all these initiatives and collaborations, I think that's one of the things that I like the most of being here.
Amazing. And what do you think on how can we speed up the crypto adoption in general?
Crypto understood as the cryptocurrencies, right? I think this is not really my topic, but I think that one of the most difficult things is user experience in general. I can see that although trading is now becoming popular, when you look at the projects and you try to tell someone the project you're working in, I think the technology is very far from what regular people is used to. So I think a lot of work needs to be improved into explaining the end users how this technology will be used and to make life easier to them. So I think one of the things that we should look forward towards is to improve the user and the end user experience. Once this is done, I think this will improve a lot.
Amazing. And what do you take takeaways into how best to bring more women into the research and blockchain space?
To bring more women, you mean?
Women.
Yeah. I think the problem actually comes from way before. I think there's only a few women involved in technology, so it's not that blockchain isn't a stopping barrier for women, but the stopping barrier comes way sooner. So in general, I think that especially in developed countries, women do have access to all these science and engineering, and they although you have access to everything, it's surprising how only few of them get engaged. And I think it's because we are missing some role models, and that there's not much effort. Well, now it has been improved, but for many years there were no efforts from the government to make a change on this. So I think it has to come from way before, when you are in primary school and when you are in high school, and that you really get promoted into liking all these kind of things. And then if there is enough women, then some of them will end up in the blockchain space. But yeah, I think we only have a few, because there are only a few that are able to work on these things, which is a pity, I must say.
Yeah, totally agree with you. And we have 5 more minutes, and maybe a few more questions. How can we support and be part of your movement and vision with Dusk Network?
I think the best thing is that you stay connected in the Telegram chat group, because there are a lot of interesting discussions that are going on in there, and also yeah, some initiatives, and they are always looking for people willing to collaborate. So on the one side, you can take a look at the GitHub account from Dusk Network, and we would be very happy for any contribution. And as I said, being in the Telegram group and being active, asking any questions, and if there's anything, any project that you think that could be built on top of Dusk, that would also be a very nice initiative to work on together. Yeah.
Super, thank you so much, Marta. And then the last question from Hein: how does computation cost for Plonk compared to Monero and Zcash providing proving system? And what sorts of security implications are there in the different system used?
Okay, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, you can see it in the chat.
Is it in the chat? Okay. Yeah. 1 second, because I cannot see it.
Yeah, Hein asking, what are the computation costs for Plonk compared to Monero and Zcash? Yeah,
I can go through this slide if you want. But before that, the main difference between Zcash and Monero is that they do not support smart contracts logic. So it's just a currency, really. Whereas our blockchain does have a smart contract, supports a smart contract logic. So that's the main difference. Although they have a privacy layer, we have 2 privacy layers. On the one side, we add privacy to the transactions like they do. And on the other hand, we also have privacy for smart contracts. So that's something that they don't have. And if we look at the protocols that they use, Zcash is now changing the protocols that they use, but compared to Monero, their verification time grows as the circuit grows. In their case, it may not be a problem because they have a fixed circuit. It's the same with Zcash. So they have a circuit that has a certain logic, and then they just apply the protocol on it. Whereas in our case, with the transactions, is fine. But if we look at smart contracts, every smart contract has their own logic. So you have to represent all the smart contracts as a certain circuit. So with that circuit, you build the proof on top of the circuit. Since we have different circuits of different sizes, this means one trusted setup per circuit. So this was not a reasonable assumption that you can do. So this is why we decided to use Plonk, which it had this universal trusted setup phase. So if we compare with Monero, in our case, our implementation made the proving time of the generation of proofs way shorter and faster than it would have been with bulletproofed. But yeah, I would say that maybe in this case, it wouldn't make super sense to compare it with them because they don't have the smart contract capability. So yeah, this is why in our scenario, it made more sense to go for a universal trusted setup. This is why we chose Plonk. And as I said, now we are improving many of the things that are around Plonk, which is the type of statements that we can improve and to make it more efficient overall.
Super. Thank you so much, Marta. And I really appreciate you coming today and sharing amazing insights about Dusk Network and the security layers. And feel free to share more information about you and the project in the chat below. And yeah, thanks so much.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And thanks again for the invitation.